Welcome to 123 from District 123, a podcast that explores and shares the magic happening throughout District 123 schools every day. In each episode, we chat with the people responsible for moving inspired educational ideas from the imagination to the classroom. We dig deeper into those ideas and share the successes from some of the most innovative practices seen throughout Oak Lawn Hometown School District 123. 123 from District 123 is proudly brought to you by the District 123 Ed Foundation. More information about the foundation can be found at d123edfoundation.org. Now here's your host, District 123 Superintendent Dr. Paul Enderle.
Hello world and welcome to 123 from District 123. I am Paul Enderle, the Superintendent of Oak Lawn Hometown School District 123 and the proud host of the 123 podcast. A podcast that takes a deeper dive into exploring great ideas in the field of education. This podcast today is brought to you by our School District 123 Ed Foundation. Our foundation is comprised of an amazing group of community supporters who work in conjunction with the school district's mission, vision, and strategic direction to acquire and distribute resources to enhance learning opportunities for our students and advance special innovative projects. And that's one of the reasons why we're here today. We are very excited to have two middle school reading teachers, Candace Hines and Clare Wilmsen, joining our 123 podcast to share with our audience how they are working to build passionate readers, not just teaching our kids how to read, but striving to instill a love or passion for reading in some of our middle school teachers in District 123. Candace and Clare, welcome to the 123 podcast. And if you could just begin by sharing a little bit about yourselves with our audience.
Sure thing. Hi, I'm Clare Wilmsen. This is my fourth year here at Oak Lawn Hometown Middle School, and I'm actually a former student of the district, so it's kind of fun working with my old teachers. But we just wanted to start this project to help our students learn to love reading just like we did, and that's why we're reading teachers.
And I'm Candace Hines. I'm in my 20th year of teaching, 16th here at in District 123. Claire and I have been partners for 4 years now. Prior to being sixth grade, a reading teacher, I was eighth grade, and a reading specialist, so reading is definitely my passion, and sharing that with students is my own little mission.
So as a collaborative, you two have a very diverse group of backgrounds and experiences. And Claire, you and I share a commonality. You came back and you're teaching in the school and the district you came from. And I spent 10 years teaching at the high school I graduated from as well. And that is a very special thing. And I hope you've enjoyed that along the way. I know sometimes people always ask me, well, how was it like coming back and being, being a colleague with the people who taught you? And honestly, it wasn't really that big of a deal.
No, it took a few weeks to get used to calling everyone by their first name.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. That's both a unique but a very rewarding opportunity that only, a handful of people have the opportunity to experience. So
absolutely.
That's very, very nice. So the two of you came up in collaboration with a great idea, this concept of building passionate readers. I know when I first read your application, it really resonated with me because I felt like it was almost a higher level calling that, as reading teachers, obviously you're passionate about teaching children to read, to analyze what they're reading, and to think metacognitively, and also to be able to write well. But to kind of add to that responsibility, instilling passion for what they read, especially in young adolescents, quite a challenge.
Well, I agree. And Claire and I, we had talked because over the years, at least I've noticed, over the years, we've had a change in curriculum, not only building level, but from, the whole United States, and with the Common Core state standards, there was a shift in how we teach, and a larger emphasis on writing and nonfiction, which is all great, but we were concerned that we were losing the focus on this. We do want you to love this too, and throughout my years as a reading specialist, having children who struggled with reading and therefore they thought they hated reading, and finding that one book that they enjoyed, regardless of what it was just such a goal, because then from that point forward, you lose that I hate reading stigma. Sure. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose that somehow in the shuffle of or shift in education today.
Yeah, and I that resonates with me a lot. I know as a youngster myself, I remember I struggled with reading. It didn't interest me. It wasn't a passion for me until I remember in 8th grade, I got chicken pox and I had to stay home from school for about a week. And my mom said, "Okay, you're going to be doing something." And she gave me a copy of the book Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls, and I read it over a couple of days from front to back, and I realized I not only enjoyed the book, and I think it triggered for me a passion and love for reading, which continued till today, but it gave me a sense of accomplishment. Hey, this book was over 100 pages, and I read it front to back, and I was moved by it, and it really, when you said one book, sometimes that's what it takes some of our young people today. And
in order to do that, you have to have a lot of books.
Sure.
So we each had already had a small classroom library collected from over the years. Mm-hmm. And when Dr. Farrell was here, she had a book club, and the title of that book was Passionate Readers. And Claire and I both joined that book club to see what there was that we didn't already maybe know, and to help us figure out how to bring that passion of reading back into our classrooms.
Great. So that was, we follow this 1, 2, 3 format. So that was your one big idea. Mm-hmm. You really wanted to instill passion, and you engaged in this book discussion, and the book discussion generated some ideas.
And at first it was a little overwhelming because the book would talk about these teachers who'd done such a good job. They had wall-to-wall books, they had all this cool furniture, and we're like, wow, that looks amazing, but how could we even start? And then through Candace and I met over the summer, and we just sat down and we said, okay, let's do something with this book club idea. And we thought a grant and it was actually Candace's idea. Let's apply for this grant. That would be our first step into making sure we actually put this into a plan.
Great. Excellent. And then that's where the application to the foundation came in, and the rest was history. Excellent. Well, that was your one idea, your one inspiration. Let's move to our second part of our podcast, which is really discussing and talking about the lessons learned along the way. You've been kind of focusing on this concept for the past year. You were awarded the mini grant. What were a couple of lessons you learned along the way, good, bad, or indifferent?
We have definitely some of all of the above.
For sure.
Claire, you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. It's been a learning process. At first, we got our books, and they're exciting, and it's shiny and new, and the new furniture. But we quickly realized if we didn't actually plan to give the kids specific time to look through the books, it would just kind of go to the wayside. We get so busy in our day-to-day curriculum, so we learned really quickly if we don't make time, they won't be used. So we started dedicating our monthly library trips to just free reading. So we'd pick out books, they'd look at our books in the library, so that's been really helpful.
Great, excellent.
Kind of in that same vein, the excitement over a dedicated area in the classroom, the children really, really love, but they also love just the furniture. So, they're 12. So having a trampoline chair or a beanbag chair, they will also just sit there and do other work there. But we have to make sure that dedicated space is utilized the way it was intended and not just as, oh, yay, we have cool furniture, you know. And I think we anticipated some of that, knowing that they're 12 and there's, you know, a yoga ball, you know. But just making sure that we continue the effort and emphasis on the books, you know. And that was just, I would say, like, just challenges to make sure that you do more beyond just setting up that area.
Sure. So the mini grant itself encompassed what materials did you collect? What was the things that
we put together a survey for the children, asking them for either book recommendations on titles or just trying to get ideas from genres for them. You know, what are you interested in? So I know for me, I did not have nearly enough graphic novels, nor creepy, scary horror books. That right now is very popular with my students. Whereas I had already had book collections of books in a series. They weren't really interested in those. So a lot of the students want some quick reads. So we took surveys, and then we used through Scholastic mainly, because then we get Scholastic points, and then we can use those points to get more books. So we bought hundreds of books, some containers to hold the books, a carpet area, as well as multiple pieces of furniture, trampoline chairs, beanbag chairs, ottomans.
Actual bookshelves.
Oh, yeah, additional bookshelves. So everything to create a dedicated area that's very clearly like a mini library.
So you elicited student feedback, so you gave them some voice and some choice in the process. You dedicated time to allow kids to browse, and then ultimately also dedicated space and a kind of a reconfiguration of what that looks like. Just logistically, you know, your block of time you teach, how much time is that monthly library time, or how much time do you give students to go through this selection process?
Not enough, but we're working on it. We're trying. So we have I don't know. That's what 80 minutes once a month, but that's in a day.
Right.
So we also try, if you finish early, if you finish your work early, you can go there. If you finish your bell ringer early, we have some students that definitely strive to find their way over there. For me personally, though, I want to work on at least once a week trying to find a path to that corner.
And we both have figured out a checkout system. So students are allowed to write down the title and their name, and they can take the books home with them. So even if we run out of time in class for reading, those books can go home with them. And they've done a really good job of not losing them or damaging them.
And we have a little book return box, and getting a couple students to be kind of in charge of maintaining the library and the organization of the library. And some things like that. So it's every week is a little bit better, a little bit smoother. But I have pages and pages of books checked out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And what is your, at this point in each of your libraries, what is your volume? How many of these books would you say you have approximately for kids to choose from?
That varies, because when I was part of other reading programs, part of the reading program was that students were supposed to have books that they could read independently, but we didn't have quite the funding back then. And so, Dr. Enderle, I have a book problem. And you can talk to Mr. Hines about the book problem, because
so you have a vast library at home too.
Well, that is now down to the Kindle. But in the classroom, I would say I have thousands of books.
Right. I'm probably still in the hundreds, but it's growing. And the survey that the kids answered for us really helped to even out my library. Because at first, my books came from my own collection, garage sales, donations, but it really was mostly things I like to read from the kids. Now I have such a more diverse library, like tons more nonfiction and things that don't really interest me, but the kids love. I've got sports books now. I've got all kinds of things. So that's really helped.
I have some cookbooks. I need to actually get away from the children because they look really good.
It's funny how the trends flow with that. Like you were saying, horror, or sports, or cooking. You know, every year I'm sure you're going to be confronted with different trends that pop up that kind of tap into kids' interests a little bit more. So if I were a reading teacher at the middle school level who wanted to incorporate this concept of a book club philosophy, a few ingredients to that then would be to try to listen to student voice, capture what interests them, try to get access to reading materials that are high interest, provide dedicated time for kids to not only read, but to also select the books. And then, of course, the other component would be to try to create a space that's comfortable for each child's, style of where and how they would like to read.
And one other piece I would suggest is when you take them to the middle school library, Mrs. Spadell does such a great job of working with the students, and she's always trying to tell me, just sit down. But when I get to walk around with the students and talk to the students about their books, they're very often, our building library might have one or two copies of something, and it's nice when I can tell the students, come see me later. We have a copy of that in our classroom library. So it helps me know what they're interested in, and I'm still in the library having those conversations. Ooh, what's that book? Oh, do you think we should put that one in our classroom library? And just, making sure to continue to share that love of reading with them at any opportunity you have. So I pay a lot more attention now to what they're picking up in our own Oak Lawn library.
So actually interacting with the kids about what they're reading, maybe about what you're reading. I know some teachers put what they're reading out on their door.
We do that as well.
Yeah, just to simply model, a joy for reading. So that's excellent. And the outcomes, the last component of our conversation, maybe three, a handful of things that you've seen as positive outgrowth or outcomes, things that you're seeing in our students, things maybe this idea is leading you into future ideas.
Well, one of them is definitely when we give them that time, they really, really just love digging through the containers. All of my books are separated by genre, and so they're just pulling those baskets in and out or asking me for something. But most of the time I will ask them, oh, what are you looking for? I'm just looking, and they will spend 15, 20 minutes, going through and looking at the classroom library, and it just makes me very happy that they're eager to do that. So if given the time, they're not goofing off. They're using that time. They love that. So that was a really nice outcome to know that something that was passionate for us is becoming passionate for them.
Yeah, it's kind of contributes to that culture of reading that we try to create, having the book just there and allowing time for reviewing. When you think of a library, people are obviously sitting somewhere reading, but there's a lot of perusing going on as well. So very good.
And that love is kind of bleeding over into other things that we see with them.
Right. So then we do see students, our students, with our books all over the school. So they're carrying them from class to class. So they've checked it out from my library, but I see it in the social studies room or the science classroom.
Lunchtime.
And even kids will be like, oh my gosh, this science book, I have to show Mrs. Foley. And then they'll check it out. And it's just so cool that it is going into other classrooms and they're making connections. So if they didn't have time to dig through and figure out how they could connect this to their other studies, we wouldn't see that.
Absolutely.
So those two are related, but definitely things we've noticed.
So the culture that is within your classroom, but also the culture that expands outside the four walls of your classroom.
Right.
You talked a little bit about that key ingredient of the interaction. Do you see, or do kids have time dedicated time to discuss their books with each other, like the peer-to-peer, the collaborative
It's
piece.
funny that you mentioned that, because that's our third piece.
Oh, that's your third
That's
piece.
our third
Absolutely.
piece.
Okay.
We've noticed that they're just so much more willing to discuss with each other what they like reading. They will recommend books to each other, and I think we modeled that. Like when we first got the books, we would display the new books in a specific area and read them the front. And I told the kids, like, is it wrong to judge a book by its cover? No, that's one way that an adult decides what to read. So we've kind of taught them how to look through, and when we've given them recommendations, now we hear them using that same language to talk to each other.
Sure.
So
Interesting.
And it's it's okay to abandon a book,
Right.
And now I remember. I'm like, I had a thought, where'd it go? And we try to do our own book talks, and it's not only, it's endearing to see them kind of model that. So with this being Black History Month, I went through and grabbed a whole bunch of things off of my shelf that might be in different genres, and put them in one specific spot, but went through and talked about the fiction and the nonfiction that was available. And so here's some books we're highlighting this month, and if anyone wants any. They also continue, when I get the Scholastic box, oh my gosh, they love to be the first one to get a book.
Oh, yeah.
So I quickly give book talks of any new books that I
Okay.
get, and then I'm like, does anyone want to borrow this now? So before this book belongs to Mrs. Hines stamp goes in there,
Right.
I'm like, okay, hold on a second, So so they do love that. They love to be the first one to get their hands on something,
Interesting. Yeah.
and then they are very, very willing to talk about it when we ask, all right, here's the book I'm reading right now. Anyone else have anything that they want to recommend? And we try to do that as we get close to library time too, so they have books that they
Sure.
can be on the lookout for,
Right.
that their friends recommend when they go.
It's interesting, this focus on, interest and choice and passion. As this trickles like in and out of your curriculum too, sometimes when you're looking at a school curriculum, there is a cold text given to a child. There is a novel the class decides to read. Have you experienced any maybe uptick in kids having voice and saying, well, this bores me, or this doesn't interest me as much as the book I'm reading here? And how do you combat that? How do you work? Because you have to work with that too.
No, and I never even made the connection to that until you said that, because yes, absolutely, I have heard that this bores me. Although, although we've actually we filled out paperwork outside of this to actually adjust our curriculum. So we removed a book and replaced it with something else this year.
Yeah.
But because of some of that feedback we've
Sure.
gotten from kids,
Sure.
they now expect to be entertained by their reading.
Right.
They expect to enjoy what they read.
Yeah.
And so we had a book in our curriculum that was just not fun for anyone involved, although it had its purpose. But we were fortunate enough to be able to find a book of similar topic,
right, same themes,
but
more engaging.
much more engaging, and
Right.
so it is difficult. So, and there's times when we do get that, and so we try to then focus on, well, what is the purpose of this then,
Sure.
And we talk about, we have an author's purpose is not always to entertain. Sometimes it's to inform, and it's
Right.
to persuade, and so we just kind of tie that all in, and we're also honest with them about, yeah, this one's not too hot for me either. So what's the point of it?
Right.
Why are we reading this then? And talk about, well, there's this piece of information I'm getting from this that I need to move forward with my understanding. So I think it's important to be honest with the students.
Yeah.
Right. And on the other hand, we've had some students who are really into the books we're reading as a whole class. And so then we both made an effort to buy other pieces by the same author.
Okay.
So they can get more exposure, same writer. If you like that style, well then look for more text from that
Sure.
person.
Yeah. Kids have to be taught that. Kids really do have to be taught that. It's not just a random choice of something you see. Any closing thoughts? Anything to share? I'm again thinking of maybe an audience. You guys have given us a really good idea of how this program works and how this project, this concept works, and I think any educator who is thinking of doing something along the same lines. You've given them some good hints. Any other words of wisdom before we wrap up?
It can get costly.
Yes.
So think ahead of time. What you're going to do the years following. Mrs. McCarthy and I have talked about a place where she purchases her books from that are quite economical. I tell you, but I can't remember. I'm going to get that from her right after this. But also things like the Scholastic, which has affordable books in it, not only for students.
Sure.
So I actually, Claire and I both also still put those Scholastic magazines out for the students to order books from and to encourage that. Because there's always books for $5 or less.
Right.
And then, so just kind of have a plan in place, because you don't want to put the time and energy into something like this and then not try to continue to keep it updated.
Right.
Very good.
And then I think you just have to know that this is not a project that's just done. You don't just
Sure.
put it all together and then think, okay, now I've got my reading philosophy set up. You have to keep updating. You have to keep using it. You'll probably have to replace things. So it's awesome and it's fun, but it's ongoing for sure.
And there's some motivation to that too. The fact that there's no endpoint. I know sometimes it's tough for us to get our heads around, but having that ongoing nature of it kind of keeps things alive and fresh as well.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you
Thank
both
you.
very much for sharing your story with us. Certainly inspirational. You are doing great work, and you're making a great difference in the lives of our students. So thank you very much for coming in and sharing this wonderful
Thank you.
idea
And
with
thank
us
you to
today.
the Ed Foundation for giving us this opportunity.
Okay. All right. Well, next time on the 123 podcast, we're going to tell a story of yet another innovative idea in School District 123 and talk about STEM and a project that one of our elementary teachers is using to make learning active for her students. So for our two middle school reading teachers, Candace and Clare, our producer Natalie, who's always got her hand on that mute button for me, this is Paul Enderle checking out. Thank you for listening to 123 from District 123. And until next time, remember, when we believe, our kids succeed.